Hey, what's up everybody? It's Mike from Cornfield Customs, and it's another Monday in the shop and kind of get my week going. I got a little bit of extra stuff to do today than normal. Last Friday, the power was off. We had a tree fall across the power lines right out in front of the shop, so that kind of set me back. So I've got some stuff that I need to get caught up on. I wanted to get the deck lid on the 51 convertible wrapped up last week. Well, that didn't happen. That was my plan for Friday. I've got the inside all primed. Our Cleco holes are welded up on that. And then here's the inner structure all primed. It's ready to go back on. So that's gonna be one of the big things I've got today is I wanna get the inner structure put back on, the skin put back on. I left a couple Cleco holes right here just for alignment, one on each side. So that corresponds with the inner structure. That way I can make sure that the skin is lined up where I had it before, and I can weld those Cleco holes up after the fact because they are right on the edge that's gonna come through our hem edge. So there shouldn't be a whole lot of distortion there and easy to correct. But what I did do last week is I made this reverse panel here. It's pretty nice. I'm real happy with the way it came out. It's a pretty tricky piece for being so small with the low reverse kind of increasing into a pretty aggressive reverse coming up around the tail light, and I turned the edge over the peak. That way I'm not edge welding right in the peak. I brought that over about an inch and I've got it tacked in place to the top outer piece that I made earlier, and I'm really happy with the way it fits and it flows, and it looks good with the deck lid inner and outer skins on there. So that's going to be the big one for today, is to get the inner and outer skin reconnected on the car. And I'm going to do my best to document that as I go throughout the day, because I know I've mentioned it before, but a lot of people have had questions about it. So that's the big thing on the docket today, is to get caught up from what I missed Friday and a little bit on Saturday. I also have some frame rail bending I need to knock out today that, again, I was supposed to do Friday, but again, with the power being off, that didn't really go as planned. So right now I've got the machine set up for easy way bending. The rails I have to bend today, of course, are going to be hard way. So I have to tear the machine down, which we've seen in other tube bending videos, but completely tear it down, swap it over to hard way tooling, get it put back together, do some test bends, and then I can bend up these rail sections. That way I can get them shipped out. Which brings in another problem, is while the power's back on, my internet's still out. So that kind of throws me through a loop with being able to get shipping quotes and get stuff shipped, because I use an online portal with my LTL carriers. So I'm gonna have all these frame rail sections sitting around that I can't ship out until we can get the internet back. It is what it is. So I'm gonna deal with that. But the good thing is that's pretty much all I've got on my list for today, is those 3 sets of frame rail pieces and work on getting the deck lid put back on the 51 convertible. But in this video, I'm gonna break this section up over time between a couple different videos. But in the last, one of the last videos I posted walking around the shop, somebody asked for me to show some of the tools that I've got in the shop around the outside that I don't talk about a whole lot. So I'm gonna start showing you more of the equipment. I'm not the greatest about talking about what I've got and that kind of stuff, because unless I'm using it, I don't really think about it. So I'll give you a little bit of a tour around our machine tool area and a little bit around the metal shaping area, and we'll see how time looks on this. I don't want to drag it out too far, but I'll show you some of the machines I've got, some of the stuff I use all the time, some of the stuff I rarely use. But I'll show you some of that, and we'll keep on moving. I don't really do a ton of machining. I'm not a machinist, but I do have some machine tools that I use to help me make tooling and to do small odds and ends machining jobs for personal projects. So I'll show you some of that. I've got a small South Bend shaper. I've actually never used this. I'd always wanted one and thought it would be handy, and I've had it for like 4 years and I've never used it. So yeah, this one just sits. It might be going away shortly, so we'll see. I'm pretty limited on space, so can't keep them all. This is one of my Bridgeports. Mainly I use this one as just an oversized drill press. This was the first Bridgeport that I had, and it's an all right machine. It's got a little play in the ways. So when I got my other Bridgeport, this one just kind of turned into an oversized drill press. So this is my second Bridgeport, and it came from a buddy of mine that had a motorcycle shop, and it's in a lot better shape, and I do some machining on it for making tools or boring, and I mean right now it's set up to, of course, drill a hole. So again, I'm not doing a lot of precision machining. I'm not a machine shop or a job shop for machining, but it's nice to have around when you need it to perform these operations. A lot of times on the milling machine, I rough out all of my Linux tooling or my Pullmax tooling to get it close, and then I file fit it by hand. But this is an invaluable machine to have in the shop, so I think everybody should have some kind of milling machine. And then this is my South Bend lathe. I use it a lot for turning bushings and just shafts and stuff when I'm making little parts. Again, I'm not a precision machine shop, so this is an older machine, but again, it's super handy to have around when you need it. It'll go a couple months without being used, and then I'll use it every day for a week. Same thing with the milling machine. They're good to have, but I don't use them all the time. And this is my LeBlond #2 horizontal milling machine. I've only used this one a couple times, but it's just a really neat machine, and being a LeBlond, it was made here in Cincinnati. I was at an auction and it went super cheap. I think I paid a few $100 for it with a pile of tooling. So it's just a neat piece. Again, I don't really use this one much, if ever. I think I got it in 2018, and I've used it on a couple small jobs, but it's just a neat piece to have with the local history, and when you need it, you need it. That's pretty much my machine tool area. We got the horizontal mill, lathe, 2 vertical mills, and then over there in the corner, we have the shaper. So we'll come over into the metal shaping area, and everybody's seen me run the power hammer, so you know, that's my big hammer, and then we've got the little hammer over there, but we'll start on this side. So even though I use a lot of power equipment, I still go back to a lot of hand tool stuff. So I have a PEX toe stake table, and you can see a bunch of stakes and T-dollies underneath. I use this a lot. You can have all the power equipment in the world, and you're still gonna wanna come back and use hand tools to refine stuff, especially on complicated parts that are hard to get into. So hand tools are a must, and I collect all this stuff, and I use it a lot. From there, we move over to my Milwaukee air planisher. This is an original one. It's X181. This is my favorite air planisher. I've had CPs, I've had a couple other ones, and this one by far I like the most. So that's the main go-to on air planishers. I've got a pile of tooling here at the machine, and then I'll show you some of the other tooling that I have over with all the power hammer tooling. And then here's the bead roller. I don't use bead rollers much anymore. In the beginning, when I got this machine, I didn't have a Pullmax or a Linux, so this was my go-to for putting in bead profiles. The big thing that sold me on this machine was, instead of just having a hand crank at the top that most bead rollers have standard, you know, to adjust your tool height, once you get that set, it's got this quick release handle that raises and lowers the tooling. So that's really handy if you're doing a bunch of stuff that's all the same depth in the middle of a panel. That way you don't have to count rotations as you crank the handle. So yep, there's the bead roller. This is my pantograph engraving machine. I actually have a video of me using it on here just as a demo. Mainly this is just a kitschy, neat thing. I use it for engraving ID tags when I build a full car, but essentially you have a platen table, and you bring over the guide and you trace the little brass letters, and you can scale it by changing your slides. And this is pretty much like a little end mill, and it will engrave over here. So again, not something I use very often, but I've done a handful of tags with it, and yeah, it's handy when you need it, just like the other machine tools. But it's a Gorton, and it's just a really neat piece, and I've got it on a little dolly that I made just to haul this thing around. But this one might get used maybe once a year, maybe twice a year, but when you need it, you need it, and I really like this old machinery as much as I like my new stuff. And then we've got my kick shrinker and stretcher. It's a Bailey Industrial. It's similar to like a Marchant. So I use this one a lot. It's got super quick change tooling in it. They're just magneted in and you can pull them out and rotate them. But I'm actually looking at getting another one of these just so I don't have to change the tooling. You get to a point where just changing stuff back and forth, even though it's fast, it just gets annoying. And I'd much rather have a dedicated shrinker and a dedicated stretcher, and then I don't have to worry about it. So there's our kick shrinker and stretcher, and there's my wheeling machine, which I don't do a lot of wheeling anymore. Most of my shaping work, I'd say 99%, is on the power hammer. I do use the wheel for form, so I have the rubber coated upper wheel in here, and I use it for just forming the panel to get a nice uniform radius by changing out the lower anvil, matching it to the radius we want. We can form that as it rolls through, and I find getting a more accurate form with the wheeling machine versus bending over your leg or bending over a former. So I like to use the wheel with a rubber coated upper wheel to really dial in our form. So I've got some brake liner rivet machines. I don't use them a whole lot either, but you're gonna find that I like to collect junk. I just like the design of all these machines, and every manufacturer was a little bit different. So I just think they're neat. Most people, you can find them at swap meets for a couple bucks. Or I've gotten, this one was gifted to me, and then these two I found at a scrap yard. And this one I think I bought for like 60 or 70 bucks. And I stepped up on it mainly because I really liked the signage that came on it. So not something I use very often anymore, but they're just neat to have around. And again, I'm a hoarder, so I just like to collect old stuff. One of the big questions I get all the time is, what are those silver things on the back wall? So these are contour sweeps, and they're a unit of measure. So each one is a different radius, increasing in 1/16 of an inch rise over its length. So I use those to gauge sweeps on quarters, doors, roofs, hoods. It's just a large measuring tool. So that's what those are. Maybe in a future video I'll do a deep dive on them and we can talk about it. And then I've just got junk all up on the shelves, random bucks, parts that didn't turn out right, test pieces, all kinds of stuff up there. And this is my Lennox reciprocating machine. It's similar to a Pullmax, just a different manufacturer. This one was made in the US. It uses 3/4 by 3/4 stem tooling, which is similar to a Pullmax. I make a lot of my own tooling for it. So all of this tooling I've made. I try to keep it somewhat organized, but it doesn't always happen that way. So this is what I do. All of my profile work, turning edges, bead work, all of that stuff I do with the Lennox. I modified it a little bit. This handle used to be just up or down, and I made this little plate that I sell online for other people that have a Lennox, and it just gives you a couple different settings and height for your tool. It's kind of handy, that way you're not all in or all out. You got a couple other adjustments in it, and just different fixtures, edge guides, that kind of stuff I hang up over here, some roof bucks, and then more Pullmax tooling, the big stuff that doesn't really fit on the little racks. Some custom made radius gauges for doing different parts. These I use for like roll bending tubing, so I'll make those. And like test pieces, when I made the Miller Ford exhaust, This was the test piece to send to the client to make sure it's what they wanted. Another roof insert buck. And then I've got a blacksmith tong rack, which mainly I just wanted the rack because it's a neat piece with all the cast and the faded paint and chips. I thought it was really cool, but it came with all of the blacksmith tongs. So since I have a couple anvils laying around, I left the tongs in the top, but then I just use it for my hammer rack. So yeah, I don't use the blacksmith stuff much, but it's there if I ever need it. So we've got an anvil, just a good beating surface. You can do some shaping work on an anvil. I don't do that a whole lot because I've got other options. But yeah, so there's our anvil. And then here I have our hardwood tree stump for doing hand shrinking. Mainly I use this when I teach classes just to show stump shrinking and the way to do things with a mallet by hand, so you're not always dependent on power equipment. So that's one good thing about when I teach my classes, is we do cover all the basic how-to by hand before we ever get into any power tool stuff. I like to cover all that information because if you don't know how to make the part by hand, you're going to be kind of up shit creek without a paddle if you get power equipment and all you know how to do is do it with the machine. You're not really going to understand the core fundamentals of why the metal's doing what it is doing, how to do it without these machines, and if anything ever happens and you're down with your machine not running, you're going to be kind of stuck. So that's one that mainly gets used in our classes. And then we've got a lead bag. Right now I've just got my pump can sitting on it, but one of the lead bags, and then a Beverly shear, which I don't use a whole lot. This is just for roughing out, because in plenty of my other videos you've seen me just use tin snips, but I'll use the power shear and the Beverly shear to rough out my panel, and then I'll come back and fine tune it with hand snips. And then this is my tooling rack. So I've got more planishing tooling, radial tooling for the big hammer, thumbnail shrinking dies. I've got some smaller, lower tools for the wheeling machine. And then in the bottom, I've got other tooling for my pettingill. And then this is a really neat tool. So this is a hand mechanical shrinker, or like a Lancaster. So if you've got a quarter panel on a car that you need to adjust the wheel lip, you can use this by hand on the car. You don't have to take the quarter panel off, and just some old shears, information on louvering and cutting in a Pullmax or Lennox, and just random stuff. Some bead roller dies, more bead roller dies, coining tools, all kinds of just random stuff that doesn't fit anywhere else, so it just kind of lives here in the tooling rack. And then I have another lead bag on a pedestal, and I made this stand, and it's got a couple hammer holders, but then you can put T-dollies in here. So the ones that I make, it's just got this little triangle with a corresponding triangle, and it just goes in and it locks itself in with the wedge. And I was actually using it the other day on that reverse section on the 51 Ford. So these were the ones I was using to help planish and shape out that piece. I was using this one with the crisp edge on the peak. This one here was a little bit of a radius for the tight radius in the reverse. And then this is a softer radius for as the reverse fades outward. So again, like I said a little bit earlier, I use a ton of hand tool stuff. Even with all the power equipment that's in here, hand tools are usually going to be your final step no matter what. So you really want to get good with your hand tools. And then here's the big hammer again. So this is the Bailey MH37 HD. It's just a really big hammer. I think it's like 9.5 feet tall from base to the very top, and it's heavy. It's meant for doing big panels or multiple panels at once. So it's really the money maker. If I didn't have it, I wouldn't be able to do some of the larger panels that I do. I'd have to segment them down. But Yeah, so that's the big hammer, and then bolted on the side of it, I have a Bailey air planisher. I made this lower tooling just to get into a really tight area. It also utilizes the same CP style lower tool as the Milwaukee. That way all the tooling interchanges and I don't have a bunch of random sets of tooling for each hammer. I don't use this one a whole lot. It hits a little harder than I would like. So if I'm doing something that's really stubborn or really kind of got a bunch of issues, I'll rough it out on this, and then I'll go back over to the Milwaukee and finish it there. And then here is our Pettingill #1. So this is a 1909 Pettingill #1. This one had been in Cincinnati its entire life. I do have a little bit of a history video on this machine here on the channel. I'll do my best to remember to put a link in the description if you want to watch it. But it was purchased brand new from Pettingill, and it went through the E.A. Kinsey Machinery Company, and they sold it to the Bellevue Brewing Company downtown Cincinnati, and they went out of business in 1918 from Prohibition. And this hammer hung there until I got it in about 2017. So it's a really neat piece with a lot of local history, and I still do use it a lot. So it's a really, really cool piece, and I feel fortunate to have it and still put it into use. So I think I'll wrap it up with that on a little bit of the shop tooling tour. That way it gives me something to put in some of the other videos later on. So hopefully you found some of the tooling I have interesting. If not, that's okay too, but I have had a couple people ask me about some of the tooling I have around the shop. Again, I'm a hoarder. I like to collect things, tools, memorabilia, signs, tooling, just all kinds of random stuff. So I collect a lot, I wheel and deal a lot, and I'm always looking for new treasures. So yeah, hopefully you find it interesting to see some of my cluttery hoard of junk. And yeah, so I think I've rambled on enough, and I kind of need to get to work since it is Monday and I've got a lot on my list of things I need to accomplish today. So thank you guys so much for watching this video. Again, if you find these interesting and you want to see more of these me just walking and talking type things, drop down in the comment, let me know, give me some topics you want me to talk about, other than me just walking around bumbling like an idiot. So yeah, just drop down in the comments, let me know, and I'll keep these coming if you guys want to see them. If not, I can phase them out. But yeah, I really appreciate all the continued support and you guys watching these videos and commenting and liking. It's really getting the engagement going on the channel, which is helping it grow. And the more the channel grows, the more I can dedicate time to different videos, content, and that kind of stuff to grow the channel even more and get you guys the content you want to see. So thank you guys so much for watching this one and all the other videos. Leave me a comment, make sure to like it, and we will catch you guys on the next one.